Thanks for tuning in today to Pursuing Justice. I'm Harriet HENDEL. If you've been following our recent podcasts, we've been shining a light on a very much needed topic, a much needed light on a topic of great importance, and that is wrongful conviction. We had two men as guests in past podcasts, both exonerated from prison and spent a total of 73 years behind bars for crimes they didn't commit. I hope sincerely that our listeners were awed by their courage and their positive attitudes and their desire to begin their lives as members of society all over again. I should say productive members of society, because that's very much what they want. Now, today, I had hoped to have two guests from two local foundations. When I say local, I mean here in Sarasota, Florida. Foundations which have contributed grants to the Innocence Project of Florida, which is, of course, at the very core of pursuing justice. But unfortunately, their schedules weren't compatible with our recording day. So in their place, I thought about what I wanted to do, and I decided to pursue the thread of philanthropy, which will be our topic today and for the next several podcasts. And what I have done is kind of departed a little bit from what we usually do, and I'm sharing a little bit of my own philosophy about giving back to my community. And I actually have two communities because I split my time between Florida and New York. So one of the things that I very much believe is that children learn about volunteering by example. And one of my earliest memories is my mother showing me a photo of a big group of children in the Philippines that had been taken from their parents. Why? The reason is their parents had leprosy, which is very, very contagious. The children had been placed in an orphanage, and they were very much in need of toys. My mom asked me to give up some of my toys that were in very good condition so she could send them to the Philippines. I also recall that my mother wanted me to be active in Girl Scouts, but there was no troop. So she decided to form a troop and become my Girl Scout leader. And in Scouts, we did many community projects. I don't remember some of them. It was an awfully long time ago. But again, the idea of serving, teaching by example. My dad served in World War II in France. He left when I was 8 months old, and he came back when I was about 2.5. My mother promised to volunteer with the VA, the Veterans Association at the VA hospital, if he came back. And that is exactly what she did. Every week when I was in high school and beyond, she went to the ward occupied by quadriplegics and paraplegics to play Scrabble with the men there. She made a great many friends, and she also made a great difference in their lives, as it was something to look forward to. And she said some of them really beat her at Scrabble. So it was very, very challenging. To me, volunteering changes lives. And I believe that it changes lives one at a time. So as I said, half the year I'm here in Sarasota. And what I wanted to share with my listeners is the amazing amount of groups here. I'm only just scratching the surface. These are only the groups that I've gotten involved with, but there are so many here. And not just here, in every community. So what I'm hoping with this theme of philanthropy, which we will be also following with the guests we have in the next few weeks, is that you as listeners will be motivated to seek out groups in your community that possibly would speak to you and say, I'd like to help out. In Florida, the state of Florida, there is a group that was formed in 1995. It's not in any other state. And the group is called Take Stock in Children. The organization was formed in 1995, but I didn't know about it, and I didn't start volunteering until 2008. It is a mentoring organization, and it is restricted to children. Well, they're actually middle school and high school young people who are economically disadvantaged. That is the entrance requirement. You have to be, I believe you have to be on free lunch. And then they pair this young person with a mentor. So the women volunteers are matched with a young lady, and the men are matched with young boys. And they expect that the mentors will stay with their mentee all the way from approximately age 12 to high school graduation. When the student graduates, for keeping their grades up, not in getting involved with alcohol, drugs, or anything like that, or even cutting class, they do expect good behavior and decent grades, not perfect. Once they complete the program, and there are some requirements, meetings that they have to attend, but most important, they must meet with their mentors every single week. Then the reward is 4 years of college free of charge, which I think is a wonderful carrot and a wonderful reward. So right now I'm working with my second student, and she is in grade 11, and she will be graduating next year when she completes grade 12, of course, and she will go on to college. And one of the themes that they have is change a life over lunch. So many of the mentors go during lunch. I usually pick a time where I can see my student for an hour to an hour and a half. I don't feel a half hour at lunchtime is really enough. The other organization here in Sarasota that I've been active with for probably about 25 years was called Adopt a Family, and I've now switched over to Jewish Family and Children's Services. They do the same thing. They assign me a family at the holiday, and sometimes there are 9 children in a family. I had that a couple of years ago, and sometimes maybe just 7 or 5, and I fill their wish list. I do receive a list of what they would like, their ages, their favorite color, just their first name. I never meet them, and they never meet me. So it's kind of anonymous. And to me, the holiday is really all about helping those who wouldn't have a holiday if it weren't for someone like me. So many people participate in this, and I think it's a wonderful thing that they do. There's also an organization called Project 180. A close friend of mine started that project, and it's for men coming out of prison who have nowhere to go, no family, no friends. And what happens to anyone coming out of prison that has no support system? We know very well they will end up going back through the revolving door. So this is to prevent that from happening. So Project 180 has a home where these men can live, and they are now working on buying a second house for more men coming out of prison. And they help them with job training and anything else to reacclimate them back into society. A wonderful group. The last group that I've been active with in Sarasota is called Selah Freedom, SELAH, and it is for victims of trafficking. And these are young women who have been on the streets as often as prostitutes, and they are wanting to get out of what they call the life. That's what they call it, the life. Sailor Freedom has a home, a safe home for these women. They certainly can't house very many. It's just one home here in Sarasota in a secret location. And my job was to tutor one of the young women who never graduated from high school. She was on the streets at 15 and then had children. So that is what we got involved with, both my husband and I, and helping her get her GED so she could have a diploma. So that's just a sampling of a few organizations here in town. But then there are some groups in New York that are wonderful groups. One of them, and I'm going to turn the clock back to the mid 1990s, was I found out about this group through 60 Minutes, which I'm a devoted watcher every Sunday evening. And this group was called Birch Family Camp. This was a camp for families dealing with AIDS. And some of the children had already gotten AIDS from their parents through possibly blood transfusions. Some of the children were free of AIDS, and the parents were very, very sick. At that time, AIDS was a fatal disease, but sometime after, a cocktail was developed of several drugs that absolutely took people who were close to death's door and turned them around, and they were healthy again. It was nothing short of a miracle. But at the time, that drug was not developed yet. And this camp ran all summer, and every single week, a new group of children and their families came, most often from New York City by bus. It was in upstate New York, about, I would say, 2 hours out of the city. And when anyone would come to the camp, you would never, ever know what kind of camp it was, because we were hugging and kissing the children and having a wonderful, wonderful time. It's just like any other summer camp, with swimming, horseback riding, arts and crafts, games, both game. I was called the game dame. So I managed to scare up as many board games as I could that I got donated by stores in my area, and books, so that we wanted to give the kids a quiet time during the day. And their counselors would bring the children to me, and I would set up the board games and read to them, and then they would go on their way to their next activity. And then at night, I would go from bunk to bunk and read to the children so they would be able to fall asleep. It was a wonderful experience, and I think in that time frame, there was still a great deal of shame about AIDS, and initially when the camp was formed, nobody knew where they went. They went to a secret location. And then 60 Minutes came along and, interviewed the children and the families at the camp. And it was much less of something to hide and something to be very, very proud of. Another wonderful camp was formed by the incredible actor Paul Newman. It was called the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp. And that was in Connecticut, not very, very far from where I live in New York. This camp, he formed over 30 years ago. And what he wanted was to bring very, very sick children to the camp free of charge. Every possible disease a child could have, from cancer to diabetes to muscular dystrophy, it didn't matter.